Thank you for joining us for the BRF podcast. We will be releasing content from several classes that were recorded during the 2025 Brethren Bible Institute. Brethren Revival Fellowship, BRF, is a concerned movement among the brethren, seeking to call the church to stand firm for the authority of the Scriptures and to an emphasis upon the teachings of the New Testament as historically understood by the brethren. We work in the interest of proclaiming and preserving biblical values for living today. Thank you for listening. We hope that this content enriches your spiritual life and inspires you to continue fighting the good fight of faith.
So yesterday, as somebody said, it's where we finished was little bit like reading a children's story to your children, and you get to the really good part and say, okay, it's bedtime. And so today we're going to start with Mary. Mary, the mother of Jesus, and when we think of women in the life of Christ, that has to be the number one person you think about. When I see him standing up in the back, I know I didn't push my button. Are we good? Yeah, we're good. And so the number one woman, probably for all of us, is our mother. We work with broken kids, as you're aware. And I've got to say, because I'm the dad, I see a lot of broken kids who never knew their father. But I also see kids who never knew really their mother. Brenda made a statement to me a couple weeks ago that had me scratching my head, and she kept repeating the statement, and what are you talking about? And she said, are you going to get the dead lady out of my car? I said, what? I thought I misheard what she was saying. She said, when are you going to get the dead lady out of my car? So what? Oh, the dead lady. Yes, I need to get the dead lady out of the car. Annie, who I mentioned early in the week, Annie has a really interesting background in that she was raised in an extremely rich family. And so one of the things I may wind up having to work with, which I'm uncomfortable with, is her trust fund, because she's trying to wrest control of her trust fund, but she's uncomfortable with it. But I found out a little more of her story a couple weeks ago, in that Annie was adopted, and her adopted father was a professor at Franklin and Marshall College, and got wrapped up with one of his students, divorced his wife, married the student. And then because they couldn't have children or didn't have children, they decided to adopt. And so the new wife put an ad in the paper, baby wanted. After one day, the paper said, hold it, you can't do that. And they yanked the ad. But somebody had already read the ad. And somebody called this couple and said that they have their sister visiting from Kansas. And she is pregnant, she is too far along for an abortion, she's already given up 2 children for adoption, and she'd like to give up this one too. And so they put this woman up for the next number of months, which is also illegal because it kind of smacks at buying a baby, and the result was Annie. Her adopted mother became an alcoholic. Her father died in a car accident. Her adopted father died in a car accident. And then her mother developed breast cancer, continued to drink, and after a chemo treatment was drinking and had a heart attack and died. And so we now have the ashes of Annie's mother in our closet. But Annie shows strong signs of never having a godly mother. And we have a lot of other kids we work with who show strong signs of being lacking a godly mother. And so Brenda has become mom to all people. Candace, who's been here the last couple days, head back to Philly, and Brenda does the mom stuff that Candace's missing mother just can't do. And so, Mary.
So what, the dead body?
What's that?
Finish your story about the dead body.
It's I left you hanging.
Yeah.
She's cremated, not a corpse. Yeah. We're in an urn. Okay. But yeah, the original marriage resulted in a boy and a girl, and so Annie has an older adopted brother, or half adopted, whatever he is, who is about my age. And he is a retired Lancaster County judge. He was the chief of the Lancaster County court system for a while. And I got to meet him, which I was curious about. And Annie, because Annie had gotten a text from him saying, I have the ashes of your mother, come get them or I'm going to throw them away. Now understand, and I'm trying to process in my mind, saying, okay, this is the woman that took his mother away from his father. And so he just has no time whatsoever. So he told Annie, get the ashes or I'll throw them away. So that kind of started that whole escapade. And I went and met the brother, who just very obviously had nothing but scorn for this young lady who is a drug addict and has had other issues. But we have in a world that, from my perspective, is crying for fathers, but it is also crying for mothers. So my theme for Mary, I'm trying to take the major characters and said, free to be, because these are women set free. Free to be a mother. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Before we get started, let's bow our heads for word of prayer. Father and God, we come before you, thanking you for who you are and what you have done. Things you have done beyond our expectation. Things that have surprised us but haven't surprised you. We look to the future with both fear and anticipation, knowing that you're in charge. We thank you for it. We thank you for this day, for the health that you've given us to be able to come out and be here. Pray that you would be with the students, that you would give them ears that have filters. Filters that filter out the things that I say poorly. And that your Holy Spirit might serve as an interpreter, that your truth will be heard. And we bring all these things in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, our advocate, our wisdom, and our strength. And let it be so. By the way, I don't apologize for my prayer, but I do explain. A few of you were in my class a number of years ago on prayer. And when I taught my class on prayer, one of the things that stuck in me was the fact that amen has failed in its meaning to us. It's kind of, we're done. And somewhere in there I came up with the idea that it means let it be so let's just say let it be so. So that's why I finish my prayers, so deal with it. Mary, free to be a mother. And of all of the exultant things you could say about Mary, couldn't I find something better to say than a mother? I don't think there is anything better than to be a mother. I mean, to be the mother of those hooligans, which happened to be a portion of my grandchildren, I was away and asked Brenda, what are you doing today? And she took a picture and said, that's what I'm doing today. I said, oh, well, good luck in that. I hope I come back and find the house safe and you safe. And motherhood can arguably be called the most important job in the world, because the moms are the ones that shape the kids. As I've said in here frequently, my mother died when I was 14. And I have amazingly few actual memories with my mother. But I remember my mother as a little kid, when I was a little kid, holding me and reading Dr. Seuss stories to me. She was the one that trained me in my love for reading. She read Bible stories. She made sure that I was presentable for church. She taught me all of the core things that I need to know. Motherhood, the most important job in the world. Professor Tony Campolo's wife, Peggy, was a stay-at-home mom. He once heard a woman at a university party ask Peggy in a condescending voice, and what, my dear, do you do? Now, Tony Campolo, for you young ones, is probably a little bit beyond your time. I don't agree with a lot of Tony's theology. And Tony actually just died this past year, within the last year. But Tony was one of these people, things happened to Tony. And Tony was a storyteller, so he's kind of my role model as far as storytelling. Tony talks about having he was at a church in Las Vegas, and he was waiting for the pastor to show up, and he's at a casino, come outside the casino, and all the stuff's happening, and so you can't be in Vegas without dropping a couple coins in a coin machine. So the pastor's not there yet, and he slips in and drops a quarter in, pulls the lever, and the whistle's going, the bell's going, and starts pouring money out, and he looks, and there's the pastor outside. So what do you do? So he just scoops this stuff up, puts it in his coat pocket, and his coat's going like this, and so he kind of unwraps it and wraps it around. And as they're traveling, the pastor is talking about all the evils of Las Vegas. But my favorite Tony Campolo story is from, he was on a trip to Hawaii. He was preaching in Hawaii. And one of the things when you live in Philadelphia and you travel to Hawaii is that your internal clock is way off. And so it's like 2 o'clock in the morning and Tony can't sleep. And so he gets up and he goes to a coffee shop down the street, orders a cup of coffee, and these two ladies come walking up behind Tony. And so they begin to, snuggle up against Tony, and Tony kind of let it be known that no, that's not, he has no interest whatsoever in that. And so these two ladies are staying behind him and start to talk. And the one girl said, it's my birthday tomorrow. And the other one said, what do you want, a birthday party or something? She said, no, just forget I said it. And they went off down the street to look for other business. And Tony turned to the coffee shop owner and said, who was that girl? And he said, that's old Agnes, don't worry about Agnes. And Tony said, no, I would like to have a birthday party for Agnes. And he said, yeah, you kidding? No, I'd like to have a birthday party for Agnes. And so the coffee shop guy said, sure. Show up tomorrow night, we'll have a birthday party for Agnes. So Tony walked into the shop the next 2 in the morning, and it is packed. Okay, now these are Agnes's friends. What kind of friends does Agnes have? And so he's walking in, and this whole coffee shop is full of hookers. And Agnes comes in, and everybody yells, happy birthday. And there's a cake, and they light the candles, and they sing. And Agnes is standing there with her jaw hanging open. And when they're done singing, Tony said, well, you gonna cut the cake? And she just looked at him. And he said, you gonna cut the cake? And she said, guys, do you mind? She said, I've never had a birthday party in my life. I've never had a cake in my life. Do you mind if I just take it home and show it to my mom? And we can look at it. And Tony said, it's your cake. You can do whatever you want. She said, I'll be right back. And she walked out. And it was dead silence. And Tony said he did whatever any good preacher does when it's dead silence. He started to pray. And so he was praying in this shop full of hookers and the coffee shop owner. And when he was done, the coffee shop owner said, are you a preacher or something? He said, yeah, or something. He said, what kind of preacher are you? He said, I'm the kind of preacher that throws birthday parties for prostitutes. So what kind of a Christian are we? Are we that kind of a Christian, or do we need to be with people that are exactly like us? So anyway, I couldn't even see a half a picture of Tony Campolo without telling my second favorite story in the world. And so Peggy was asked, so what do you do? And she's a stay-at-home mom. And she had this answer. Peggy responded, I am nurturing two Homo sapiens in the dominant values of the Judeo-Christian tradition in order that they might become instruments of social transformation, preparing them for the eschatological utopia which God envisions from the beginning of the time. What do you do? So, what do you do? Oh, I'm a mechanic. I'm a, what do you do? I'm a nurse. The most important thing we can do is nurture our kids if you've got kids. And maybe you nurture somebody else's kids sometimes, because that's the most important thing we can do. When God chose Mary, he didn't choose a rebel who was fighting Rome and the Jewish religious system. When we read through the New Testament, through the Gospels, we see that there were a lot of problems in the world that Mary grew up in. We look at the Pharisees, which were hypocrites. We look at the Roman government, which was oppressors. We look at the soldiers who were cruel. We look at the social system where the women were oppressed. God did not call Mary to be a rebel against the system. He called her to be a mother. He chose a woman who followed the law that Jesus did not come to destroy but to fulfill. Jesus said, I did not come to destroy the law, I came to fulfill the law. Her Magnificat, the song that she sang when she met Elizabeth, is based on the song from Hannah, which Mary had memorized. We talked about this, I think, on Monday. The fact that Mary almost certainly was illiterate. There is no reason in the world that Mary should have known how to read or to write. So if she is memorizing the Magnificat, was she super intelligent? It doesn't give any indication she was. So if she was not blessed with a super intelligence, how do you memorize Hannah's song? By being at the synagogue every Sabbath and every time it's open, and you listen and you absorb. How many times do we go to church and we come home and your wife says, your husband says, your mom says, your dad says, what was the sermon about? You say, I don't know. I don't remember what the sermon was about. Mary was all there. Mary was at the point where she memorized to the point that she could create a reenactment of that for Jesus. Jesus was circumcised at 8 days, just like every other Jewish child was supposed to be. She didn't say, This is Jesus who is going to save the world. He doesn't need circumcised. He was circumcised, just like any other Jewish child. At 40 days, Jesus was presented at the temple when Mary offered the sacrifice for purification. Doesn't that kind of tell the law, the Catholic thing about the eternal purity of Mary? At 40 days, she went like anybody else and went to the temple to be purified. Every year, the family went to Jerusalem for Passover. How many children did Mary have? At least 7. Right there it is. At least 7. And it was one of the things, and I was telling John earlier, that one of the things I just love about the Bible and about studying is you just learn stuff. You'd think in my old age I would have learned everything there is, and maybe I'm just a little slow. Okay, so we have the brothers James, Joseph, Simon, Judas, and Jesus. So we've got at least 5 boys and at least 2 girls, because there's plural there. But normally you don't take 2 girls and call them all his sisters. So one assumes that he had more than 2 sisters. It's all the sisters. There was this little swarm of kids. And again, stuff that I didn't really think about. We were trying to think. Oh, it was in our Sunday school lesson. We were doing Jesus in the temple, which we're going to get to currently here. But everybody's kind of wondering about Jesus and why he got left in the temple. I'm studying this thinking, how many other kids were there? When Mary went to the temple, Jesus was 12. How many of these other, how many of these other children are along? Probably a bunch of them. And so it wasn't just Jesus that Mary and Joseph were trying to keep track of. They were trying to keep track of James and Joe and Simon and Judas and some of the swarm of sisters. And Jesus is always responsible. Jesus never gets in trouble. He certainly is out with a group somewhere. He's going to be there. And he wasn't. And so Mary was not just mom to Jesus, she was mom to all these kids as well. Jesus was a good, solid, and common Jewish name. Jesus, Joshua, Hosea, and Hershey are all the same name, same foundation, so they have the same roots. So when you look through the Old Testament, all those people are going to be basically Jesus, as far as the name itself. The solid Jewishness of the home of Mary and Joseph can be told from the names of their sons. We look at James. James is the Greek form of Jacob, and there's 3 Jameses in the New Testament. Joseph is named after his father and after the patriarch Joseph. There's 13 in the Bible. 5 in the Old Testament, 8 in the New Testament. They make an interesting trivia hunt to figure out who the 8 New Testament Josephs are. We got Joseph of Arimathea, and Barnabas, I think, was Joseph at one time. But I have no idea who the other 8 are, or the other 5 are. Simon is the Greek form of Simeon, who was one of the patriarchs. There are 4 Simeons and 9 Simons in the Bible. Judas is the Greek form of Judah, and there are 4 Judas and 7 Judases in the Bible. So Mary was not out to break tradition. They were like super, super, super traditional. So when they named the boys all got good, solid Jewish names, like everybody else in the community.
And Mary, her name was really probably Miriam.
Yeah. I think, actually, you're ahead of me, but yeah. We'll get to that, but yeah, there's a whole slew of Marys, and then there's Herod's favorite wife, Herod the Great's favorite wife was Mariamne, which is basically the same thing. And so if you're kind of a liberal, you name your child Mary because of Mariamne. If you're a conservative, you name her Mary after Miriam, the sister of Moses.
A lot of times they name their children after relatives too.
After relatives, yeah. Yeah, I get in the Amish and Mennonite community a lot, and I always find interesting, like the Zimmermans and Martins often have like different first names so that you don't have one more. One of my favorite stories from one of my coworkers was after, Amos Zimmerman forever to put him on test. And so he got a call from the office saying Amos Zimmerman called and said he wants to go on test, and so he said great. And so he left a voicemail because you can't actually call him, left a voicemail and said I'll be there next Tuesday to test. And he showed up and tested and did his work, got home, got a call from the office and said, Amos is wondering when you're going to come test. You got the wrong one. It was another one. But that's why we have, one of the people we're going to be looking at is Mary Magdalene. We're going to be looking at Mary of Bethany, because they had to define, they didn't have last names, and so they had to define them, and so Jesus was Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus the carpenter. We have among the disciples, we have James the Less. Nobody's even sure what James the Less meant. Is it James the Shorter? James the Younger? But I've always thought, I've kind of been there. When I was in high school, there were two Steve Hersheys 2 years apart. And so there was Big Steve and Little Steve. I was Big Steve. He was Little Steve.
Possibilities, it could be like a junior too.
Could be a junior. Oops, let's actually go up here, because I want to go over this. Because I want to tear this verse down. In the 6th month, this is our introduction to Mary. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. Now, we have heard that verse since we're like yay big. But if you were to take, somebody who was totally outside of our culture, and they would look at that and say, huh? There's an angel. What's Galilee? Where's Nazareth? She was a virgin. She was engaged. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack in there. So I'd like to unpack those couple verses there. In the 6th month, the angel. So the 6th month of what?
Jewish calendar?
Elizabeth's pregnancy. Elizabeth's pregnancy. So we have the story of Zacharias and Elizabeth first, and then it says in the 6th month. So in the 5th month, for the first 5 months, Elizabeth was in seclusion. Not 100% sure why, was it because of fear of a miscarriage? Was it something else? But for 5 months, she was in seclusion. And then it says in the 6th month, Gabriel the angel was sent from God. And at the tail end of this whole message, we see Luke 1:36, and behold, your relative Elizabeth, in her old age, has also conceived a son, and this is the 6th month with her who was called barren. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel. Okay, now here's an interesting task. Try to Google pictures of angels and find one without wings. There's a few. It is really hard to find them, but then the problem being, how do you know it's an angel? Because it's a label that says angel. And so keep that in mind. Keep that in mind when we have Gabriel appearing to Mary minus wings. The tradition is she was at the well. Again, whether this is true or not, but there's a very, very old tradition that said she was at the city well. Yeah. Yeah, there's a very, very old tradition that says she was at the city well when Gabriel appeared. And so, keep that in mind, because I want to come back and work on this one a little bit. But how do you know it's an angel? He did not have a T-shirt on that said angel. He didn't glow in the dark. He didn't have wings.
Wasn't Gabriel a warrior?
Michael was the warrior. Gabriel was the messenger.
Okay. I was gonna say,
Yeah.
if like this strong, mighty,
And he had a sword. But no, he was. Gabriel's the messenger.
That's true.
Yeah, that was. He said, "Fear not." So obviously, if he said, "Fear not," then fear was a factor here. Okay, so we see Gabriel a few other places. Daniel says, "When I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it. Behold, there stood before me one having the appearance of a man." Again, he just looked like a dude. "And I heard the man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, and it called, 'Gabriel, make this man understand the vision.'" So there is a man standing there, and a voice booms down and says, "Gabriel, make this man understand." And so it's basically God, maybe Jesus, pre-incarnate, talking down to Gabriel and said, "Tell Daniel what's happening." So Daniel knew it was an angel because there was a voice, and it was pretty obvious. Luke 1:18, "And Zechariah said to the angel, 'How shall I know this? For I'm an old man, and my wife is advanced in years.' And the angel answered him, 'I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I was sent to speak to you and bring you this good news.'" So Gabriel is a messenger who stands in the presence of God. And Zechariah knows that he's an angel because, well, number one, we talked about wherever Gabriel appeared to Mary, we know where he appeared to Zechariah, and then Zechariah's in the holy place. And people just don't wander into the holy place, say, "Oops, wrong turn, sorry about that." So there's something different about this guy who's in the holy place. And so it was Gabriel the angel, and he announces, "I am Gabriel the angel." Now, we are assuming that this is Gabriel, even though it doesn't say that it's Gabriel. But as he considered these things, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, "Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary as your wife, for that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit." So we assume that was Gabriel as well, but Gabriel didn't announce. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Nathanael's first reaction to this is who God spoke about as Jesus of Nazareth. Nathanael's first reaction was, "Nazareth? Are you kidding me?" Can any good thing come out of Nazareth? And I love this was the initial way that the first followers of Jesus brought other followers, said, "Come and see." To me, that's the ultimate witnessing tool. Come and see. I remember years ago, we had a young lady, our house was packed with kids. And we had a young lady, she was being abused by her boyfriend, moved into our house. And I sat down with her and I said, "I am really busy right now. I'm not sure if we'll have a whole lot of time to talk." I said, "Just watch. This is a place like you've never been before." And I feel like I've kind of lived my life in a fishbowl. The kids watch, and you say something out of order and they remember it for years. You lose your temper and they remember it for years. And so the followers of Jesus, Andrew said to Peter, "Come and see." And so come and see should be our mantra. And for those of us that are conservative, wear the covering, hang out with such that the world watches us. And that is a reason I am convinced that the head covering is a problem for a lot of people. We had some young ladies that lived with us that briefly wore a head covering because they felt convicted from watching us, and they couldn't take it because they said people are watching us. To me, that's a good thing, but you need to be able to do it. You need to be willing to have people watch. We live in this broken world where I believe that people are, and as I talked about on Monday, this God-shaped hole, just something's not right. And we have this world that is watching us saying, are you the ones that have it right? On Facebook, there's a group called the Head Covering Movement, which is interesting because I might be a member of it. I'm not sure. I get posts periodically. But I'll see people posting. I've not written on it at all because I need to keep my fingers out of that because I don't wear a head covering. And so I can't really, so you have people saying, so what comprises a head covering? Do you need to wear it when you're not praying? Do you need to, is it okay to wear jewelry with your head covering? And I just had this vision of this big gold bling necklace and earrings and a head covering. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, I think God would respect that. God takes us where we are. I mean, my thing with the head covering is that I used to have all these reasons for a head covering. And I still, if you push me, I'll still pump out reasons why a head covering is a good thing. As far as the benefits and all that. But to me, the ultimate reason for a head covering is that, oh, by the way, did you notice I wore this shirt? You know why I wore this shirt? Because Brenda's going to be here today and she likes this shirt. That's why I wore I don't particularly like the shirt. It doesn't have a pocket, and I keep having to hang things, like whatever. I hate shirts without pockets. But Brenda likes me in this shirt. And so I wear this shirt because Brenda likes me in this shirt, and because she's here today, I wore this shirt. That's the way love works. Love is pleasing the person who you love. And if you figure out something else that pleases the one that you love, you try and do that as well. To me, that is the ultimate starting point for the head covering. There are other benefits, very much so, but the starting point for the head covering is where you say in 1 Corinthians 11, it says that a woman is supposed to cover her hair, and if it says so, and that pleases the one that I love, I'm going to do it. And if this particular Facebook group is wearing necklaces with their head coverings, to me that's all cool. Because they're doing it because they love their master. At some point, they may do a little bit of reading in 1 Timothy and say, you know what, this blingy necklace may not be so cool either. I've seen head coverings with earrings that look really different. But it's my culture and what I'm used to. And so to me, the love that goes with that is what matters. So, I'm not even sure how I got from here to there, and I need to get back to here. I was just talking this morning. The thing about the PowerPoints is it forces me to keep on track and not wander too far. And every once in a while, you have to stick it in reverse and go back to your slide again. We're actually talking about Nazareth. How did Nazareth and head coverings go together?
The idea of people watching us. Come and see.
Thank you. I was checking to see if people were listening. Yes, come and see. And people are watching us. Nazareth is not mentioned in Josephus, the Old Testament, or the writings. If it weren't for the Bible, for the New Testament, we wouldn't know it exists. It's isolated. It's up in the hills, about 60 miles north of Jerusalem. We see in Luke 4:16, he came to Nazareth where he had been brought up, and as was his custom, he went up to the synagogue. So it apparently is pretty small because it says the synagogue. It doesn't say one of the synagogues, it's just the synagogue. So apparently Nazareth was pretty small in that day. And I'd mentioned the well where it's said that Mary met Gabriel, that's at the bottom of the hill. So it would be a really lousy place to be a woman if you're responsible for water. Because there's no water on top of the hill, you need to walk down the hill to the well, get the water, and walk back up the hill again. Is not this the carpenter? They had one carpenter. In fact, it's possible that he was the neighborhood carpenter. He may have gone to some other towns as well in that area and done carpentry work. The son of Mary and the brother of James and Joseph, and passage we already had. Unpacking these two verses, she was a virgin. Luke 1:34. And Mary said to the angel, "How will this be since I am a virgin?" I had a discussion with the young man that lives with us who his research tends to wander in some questionable places. And he was telling me, well, he read that somebody says that Mary was the way she thought. She wasn't actually a virgin. She may have already had a couple children. I said, no. It doesn't work that way. Mary said, "How will this be since I'm a virgin?" She didn't say, "Oh yeah, another boy. That's nice. He'll join Judas and Simon." She said, "How will this be since I'm a virgin?" In Matthew 1:21, we see, "She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. "Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel," which means God with us. When Joseph woke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded. He took his wife, but knew her not until she had given him birth to a son, and he called his name Jesus. So this is in prophecy back to the Old Testament, to a prophecy given to Isaiah the prophet. An interesting thing that shows up during Jesus' ministry. In John 8:40, "But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. This is not what Abraham did. You are doing the works your father did." They said to him, "We were not born of sexual immorality. We have one father." Kind of a sarcastic twist. We heard your story. We know about you. We know that your mother showed up before she got married in the town, and she was pregnant. And all this hokey dokey about the Holy Spirit, sure, happens all the time. And so this apparently was a story that was known. And so there's kind of this we weren't born of sexual immorality. We have one father. And so when Jesus talked about being after your father, the devil, and which he uses in another case, to a virgin betrothed. So what does betrothal mean back in the day? Marriages were almost always arranged in some form or the other. There are times I think that wouldn't be all bad. Well, of course, I speak from somebody who arranged my own marriage, so y'all over here, I think that'd be a great idea. And to be honest, I have a son in Alabama who I think sometimes would think that, because Tristan is just scared to death. He just, the whole concept of talking to a girl is really scary to him. Genesis 21:17. "And God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God approached to Hagar." And again, this may or may not have been Gabriel the angel. There are times when you actually have Jesus as God incarnate on the earth in the angel form, we see. But this angel said to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. And he lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt." He didn't have a father. So Hagar went, and interestingly, she went to Egypt. Remember where Hagar is from. When Abraham was in Egypt, he picked up a servant girl named Hagar. When Sarah had given up having children, she told Abraham, "Take Hagar," and Abraham said, "Sure thing." Hagar got pregnant. Hagar started to get a little snooty about the whole thing because she could get pregnant and her mistress couldn't. But ultimately, it says that Hagar went back to Egypt and picked up a wife for her son because there was no man involved in that. Exodus 2:21, and Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah. Makes you wonder a little bit, did Zipporah know anything about this? Seems like sometimes they did, sometimes they did not. But the person he was working for said, "You're a great son, how do you want my daughter?" And handed over his daughter. Joshua 15:16. Whoever strikes Kiriath Sefer and captures it to him will I give Achish my daughter as wife. Aksa, my daughter as wife. Wouldn't that be great? You're a trophy. You know, we're going to have a marathon. Whoever wins the marathon gets my daughter. So I just can imagine Aksa out there like rooting for people. Yes, go, go, go. No, not you. You, go. Sometimes the groom was involved. Genesis 34:3. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, get this girl for me. Now, guys are thinking that sounds like a great idea. It takes away all the nerves. You go to your dad and say, I want that one over there. No, not that one, the one in green. I want that one over there. And so Shechem told his father, I want that girl. I want Dinah. Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Then he came up and told his father and mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines of Timnah. Now get her for me. So the son may send his father on a commission saying, I want that one. And presumably if the father approved, he would go get her. At least in the case of Rebekah, she was asked. So apparently the women on occasion were involved. The servant said to him, perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I then take your son back to that land from which you came? But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine, and only you must not take my son back there. So Rebekah was given the option, but possibly not because of the fact, will you take this man or not, but will you travel or not? And they said, let us call the young woman and ask her. And they called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will. So that may have been whether she's willing to travel or not, but at least she was given some option. Engagement was considered as binding as marriage. So we see this in the law in the Old Testament. In Deuteronomy 22, if there is a betrothed virgin, okay, so this is a girl who's engaged, and a man meets her in the city and lies with her, then you shall bring them both out of the gates of that city, and you shall stone them to death with stones. Remember, from Monday, that is the penalty for adultery. The young woman, because she did not cry for help, though she was in the city. It somehow seems like a man must have written those rules. And the man, because he violated his neighbor's wife. So she is betrothed, but they are treated as married. The International Standard Bible Encyclopedia says, at the time of Mary and Joseph, betrothal called for a solemn oral commitment in the presence of witnesses. So that's what engagement, like when Brenda and I were engaged, we had this romantic moment where we had been to a wedding. We are walking down her dad's long, dark driveway. And the romance I have, I said, have you ever thought about getting married? And she said, you never asked me. And I said, will you marry me? And she said, yes. So that was it right there. No witnesses, no nothing. So in the time of Jesus, there was actually witnesses. There was a solemn oral commitment in the presence of witnesses with the added pledge of a piece of money or a written pledge that would conclude with a benediction. So it was a formal thing rather than a walk down the dirt driveway saying, you want to get married? Sure, we'll get married. And you're now engaged. So this was a formal thing. The age of marriage for girls was old enough to have a baby, generally 12 to 14. Men old enough to support a family, 20s or often into their 30s. And that's the reason widows were common in that culture, because the men were often much older than their wives. And I used to have kind of a mind of, because of Mary's maturity, that maybe she wasn't that young, but I'm thinking she probably was, or at least pre-20. The fact that she had, swarms of girls and 4 more boys means that she couldn't have been terribly old when she got married. The engagement period might last for years. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. Now, our engagement period was a little over a year, I think, mostly because I had to wait for her to grow up and she had to wait for me to grow up, and because we were really young. As a father, I'm looking back, and I'm pretty sure she was 17 when I asked her dad. And I'm looking at my boys, my girls, saying, don't you ever, at 17, ask to be married. Her parents were very tolerant with that. But they were 7 years in their engagement, served 7 years, and they seemed to him like a few days because of the love he had for her. But his love was for Rachel, of course. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed. Again, that's just an interesting phraseology. But remember that they've been engaged/married for 7 years, but no nighttime activities for those 7 years. So Laban gathered together all of the people of the place and made a feast. But in the evening, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. She was of the house of David. And so if you look, there's 2 genealogies. There's one in Matthew, one in Luke. Matthew 1:1 starts off the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And in the book of Luke, it starts off saying Jesus, when he began his ministry, was about 30 years of age, being the son, as was supposed. I love that, as was supposed, of Joseph, the son of Heli, the son of Enos, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God, is the way the Luke one finishes up. So the genealogies are very, very different. Luke's genealogy moves backward from Jesus to Adam. Matthew's moves forward from Abraham to Joseph. The 2 genealogies are easily reconciled if you see Luke's as Mary's genealogy. Matthew's version represents Joseph's genealogy. So there were David on both sides, but Luke is looking and saying, he is supposed to be the son of David, of Joseph, but he's not really. Here's where the real Davidic genealogy goes through. So the legality goes through Joseph, but the actual descendant goes through Mary, because if you were to do a DNA test on him, he is Mary's son. We also see this as well. In Jeremiah 22:30, thus said the Lord, write this man down as childless, a man who shall not succeed in his days, for none of his offspring shall succeed in sitting in the throne of David and ruling again in Judea. That's concerning King Jeconiah. King Jeconiah is in Joseph's genealogy and not Mary's. So the actual physical genealogy goes through Mary. And the virgin's name was Mary. And we kind of talked about this a little bit already. It's estimated that in the first century, 1 in 5 Jewish women were named Mary. And I find that fascinating. So you're at the marketplace and you yell, Mary! And 1 in 5 women turn their heads. It's kind of like the older among us know what it's like for somebody to yell mom or yell dad. And you're all turning, oh, that's not mine. It's because it's the Aramaic form of Miriam and because of Herod's favorite wife, Mariamne. Old Testament, there's a lot of men to name your children after. There's not a huge number of women. What's that?
Not as many females.
Not as many women in the Old Testament. So, and because of Miriam, it's huge because Moses and Miriam. There are 6 women named Mary in the New Testament. 3 of them are at the cross, which we had that discussion on Monday as well, because that gets kind of confusing. It's Mary, the sister of Jesus' mother, and no, it's not Mary. There's a comma in between. That's 2 different people. Mary Magdalene, Mary of Bethany, sister of Martha, Mary the wife of Clopas and mother of James and Joseph, Mary, mother of John Mark, and there's a Mary of Rome in Paul's greetings in Romans 16, and Mary, the mother of Jesus. All right, I'm going to leave you for a 5-minute break, and you can have that in the back of your mind. What did Mary look like? This is from a novel. Scripture does not describe her appearance, but she must have been lovely to look at. We can most accurately picture her with black hair, a broad forehead, lustrous dark eyes, and long lashes, and rich, deep complexion. Was she? Let's take a 5-minute break. I remember teaching this topic back, like I said, 1989, I think. And I made the comment that I have a theory that Mary was unattractive. I have a theory that Mary had skin problems, and what if she did? I used that story a number of years ago that I had a couple young ladies in our church Sunday school class on a Christmas Sunday school morning. And without turning it into a longer story than I wish, the one young lady had green hair and tight clothing, and the other young lady was short black hair. They were lesbian girlfriends at the time. And I taught the Sunday school lesson on Mary and said, so what if Mary was unattractive? What if she had bad hair? What if she talked with a lisp? What if she, limped? And I remember in 1989 when I taught, I had an older lady come up to me afterward just deeply offended because of the very thought that Mary could not possibly have not been beautiful. That's a verse you all know. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look in the appearance or the height of the stature. We do that all the time. We judge people from the outside. And we have a children's book that we used to read to our children called The Princess and Curdie by George MacDonald, thank you. George MacDonald. And in it, the boy was given the gift of shaking somebody's hand and feeling the animal that lived in them. And so he would shake somebody's hand and feel a snake in somebody else and feel a puppy dog in it. And so if we were able to see, wouldn't it be interesting just for a minute to see the person living inside? Wouldn't it just be interesting if just for a split moment you were able to look at the person beside you and see what lives inside? That's kind of scary. Do you want anybody to see the person living inside you? Let's go on. Something else. Something a little less. James 2:1, my brothers, show no partiality as you hold to the faith of the Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory. For if a man wearing a gold ring and fine clothing comes into your assembly, and a poor man in shabby clothing also comes in, if you pay attention to the one who wears the fine clothing, And so you sit here in a good place and you say, the poor man, you stand over there or sit down at my feet. Have you not then made distinctions among yourselves, become judges with evil thoughts? So the message is pretty strong from the beginning of the Bible to the end. Stop looking on the outside, because the outside is where we're deceived. Now here's an interesting question. Why do you have to look like Mary?
Because Joseph wasn't his father.
Jesus is the only person in the world ever that if you did a DNA test, there's only one parent. So we can assume that Jesus looked like Mary. What did Jesus look like? Isaiah 53:1. Who has believed what he has heard from us, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a young plant, like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look on him. I believe that Mary would fit exactly into that because Jesus took after Mary. I believe that if you were to walk through the marketplace, you would look right over Mary. I do not believe that Mary was unattractive. I don't believe that she had any physical defects. I believe that Mary was just a perfect Jewish girl like any other Jewish girl. I believe that there is a reason why in the Garden of Gethsemane that Judas Iscariot had to come up and identify Jesus. Because he looked like everybody else. They didn't say, get the dude that's 6'3". Get the guy that has the big bulging muscles and swaggers. Get the guy that glows in the dark. When Judas said, they're going to be in Gethsemane, and the soldier said, how are you going to identify him? How do we identify him? And they said, I'll tell you. I'll go identify him for you. Because he had no distinguishing characteristics. And you think about that, that makes logical sense, because isn't not Jesus supposed to be you and me? He is the one who died for our sins. And so Jesus is us. He is an absolute, typical Jewish man of the first century.
He says,
Right. And so, you know, we get a little bit offended, say, if we see a black Jesus picture. He wasn't black, neither was he Anglo. You know, I have all these pictures of Mary and Mary Magdalene and all that, and we have these white Anglo girls, which we're comfortable with. Because it makes us comfortable. I don't want to do like the Eastern Church icons like I did, you know, talking about who Mary was not. But neither do the pictures that I show reflect anything of what Mary looked like. Mary was a little Jewish girl. And I think totally undistinguished from the outside. And so Gabriel came up to Mary and came to her and said, "Greetings, O favored one, the Lord is with you." But she was greatly troubled at the saying and tried to discern what kind of greeting this might be. I'm going to come back to this later. But Luke wrote the book of Luke while Paul was in prison in Caesarea. And he had 2 years to do it, and he was in Jerusalem, and Luke says, I interviewed people. Who's in Jerusalem? The women. And so, how do we know that she was greatly troubled at the saying? Because Mary told him so. Mary told Luke, man, it blew my mind. And so again, we have Mary possibly at the well, but this man comes up to her, no wings, no shining in the dark, and he just walks up to her and says, "Greetings, O favored one. The Lord's with you." Maybe the voice. Maybe the voice. I don't know. I have a theory which I'm going to come to in a minute, but
Well, also, if you're standing there and you're a single woman and this guy just comes up to you and starts complimenting you,
Yeah, she's like troubled in her spirit. Yeah, sure she was. It doesn't even say that Gabriel ever introduced himself. It doesn't say, "Hi, I'm Gabriel." Mary lived a life that she was more shocked that she was called the favored one than it was that it was an angel that said it. She was just saying, "What do you mean I'm the favored one?" It's one of those things that, if you think you're humble, you're not. Yeah. You know? So if you think you're the favored one, you're probably not. And so the fact that Mary is like, the angel comes up and says, "Greetings, favored one," and Mary's looking over her shoulder to see who he's talking to. Because it certainly can't be me. Because that was where her spirit was. Okay, now, there's a fundamental difference between the response of Mary and Zechariah. I want to see if you can pick this up. Mary said to the angel, "How will this be since I'm a virgin?" And Zechariah said to the angel, "How shall I know this, for I'm an old man, my wife's advanced in years." They look the same. There's a fundamental difference between the two. What's the difference between the two?
She says, "Will this be?" That's faith.
Yep. She said, "How will this be?" It's going to happen. So she wasn't saying, "Will it be?" She's saying, "Oh, really? But how's it going to be?" Zechariah is saying, "How shall I know this from an old man?" And I want to spend some time talking about the faith of Mary. But when you look at this closely, it just blows my mind. The faith of Mary, and you kind of look at it and you say, "Oh, wow." So we have an angel. And so this is a guy standing on it. We're going to call it by the well. This is an angel that is in the holy place who announces to Zechariah, "I'm an angel." And Zechariah is still saying, how shall I know this? Well, duh, because an angel told you in the holy place. What more do you need? Yeah, right. Mary is standing by the well, and a guy comes up and talks to her. Mary had no doubt it would happen. Her question was, how would it happen? And Mary said, "Behold, I am the servant of the Lord. Let it be according to your word." And the angel departed from her. So if you're Mary, who do you talk it over with? "Hey, Mom, you won't believe what happened today." Go to your friends and say, "Hey, guys, come on, let's sit around a coffee and talk about my day today. What happened to your day today?" Yeah. I had an angel appear today. Kind of a baby. It's just, who do you talk it over with? So in Elizabeth, the angel gave her the perfect answer. Maybe. The early legends say that Mary was an orphan. She seemed to have some freedom. She just hiked up and left. You never see anything about Mary's parents. She just was able to slip away. According to Justin Martyr, who died 50 years after this is a copy and paste from a Catholic website. Mary was born in Nazareth. Her father's name was Joachim, and her mother's name was Anna. According to tradition, Mary's parents led holy lives. Her father died first when Mary was 13, and her mother died shortly after. Once Mary was orphaned, it was the duty of her closest relatives to find her a husband. And so her parents had just died. Her relatives didn't really want her, and so they lined up this carpenter dude from Bethlehem to come up and marry her. Again, that's old tradition, but maybe. Talked about that. How did Mary know he was an angel? This is my theory. You ever have the Spirit talk to you? Spirit talks to me. And how often do we, and the Spirit said that, for me, the Spirit is often saying, "Go talk to this girl." And sometimes I do, sometimes I chicken out. I have yet to follow the voice of the Spirit and be left down. I believe that Mary was sensitive to the Spirit, and I phrase as the knowledge of the Spirit by one who lives close to the Spirit. She just recognized this angel. Okay, so this is the grand total. If you take out all the commentary in between of Mary being disturbed and all that stuff, this is all the angel said. Greetings, our favored one, don't be afraid, yada, 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 and about the Messiah. And then Mary asks, how will it be? And she says, the Spirit says, the Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. And this is the 6th month of her who was called barren, for nothing will be impossible with God. And he was gone. She was told very, very little. She wasn't told how to deal with Joseph. She wasn't told about anything except you're going to have a baby. Elizabeth is pregnant, and the angel was gone. She had only the word of the angel that Elizabeth was pregnant. Okay, faith here. So, there was nobody to talk to. Sarah, Hannah, Elizabeth all returned to normal lives, and the baby came. When the angel said to Sarah, you're going to have a baby, Sarah laughed. She and Abraham went back to normal relationships. She got pregnant. Hannah, when she prayed, she and Elkanah went to normal relationships, got pregnant. When the angel came to Zechariah, Elizabeth and Zechariah went back to normal relationships, had a baby. Mary did not. Life would never be normal for Mary again. She had only the word of the angel that Elizabeth was pregnant. And Elizabeth is 100 miles away in Hebron. So how long did Mary wait before she went to Elizabeth? Okay, so there is the map. She lives in Nazareth. Hebron is down there. And how you travel depends on whether you want to go through Samaria or not. You may want to take the trip around to avoid the scum in Samaria. Okay, so I did a little bit of like GPS stuff because I'm saying, okay, so this is 100 miles. So what if we're like at college and head to York? 26 miles. What if we're going to Greencastle? That's 83 miles. Now, not that anybody would actually live in Hagerstown, but I've heard of people that live in Hagerstown. That is and Brenda told me she looked in her GPS before coming here, it was 98 miles. That is the walk that Mary took.
Dude, that's an hour and a half drive.
Yeah, that's an hour and a half drive, let alone walk.
And we have the Susquehanna to contend with now, but they hit Jordan.
They had the Jordan, and you didn't have any Samaritans to deal with either. And Mary said, behold, I'm the servant of the Lord, let it be to me according to your word. And the angel departed from her. And the thing that's kind of been a theme for me as I'm talking here is the fact that Mary, and you would think that for the mother of God, that there would be some sort of great miraculous sign, that the angel would appear in a flash. And he would, have, gold letters in his chest, and he would have flames coming out. The greater the faith, the less the flash. That's it?
You're saying it's not needed.
It's not needed. For those with faith, you don't need it. When you go back to the Old Testament, it's the people with no faith that needed more flash. They needed more signs. They needed more things. And so we have Gideon. So the angel of the Lord reached out with the staff that's in his hand and touched the unleavened cakes, and fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat. Gideon was a man with little faith. And God kept having to prod him, saying, move, go, 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 because they didn't have the faith. He's a man of valor, yeah. And aren't signs kind of cool? I mean, you know, if you're looking for a boyfriend, wouldn't it be great if God had like a neon arrow pointing down? This one right here. So, Jesus says an evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign. So with Mary, there was basically no signs. An unidentified angel appeared to her and said, "You're going to have a baby." And this is the Message version of it. Mary didn't waste a minute. She got up and traveled to a town in Judah and the whole country. Do you understand the faith for that? She did not miss a period. She did not get morning sickness. She had no external signs she was pregnant. Mary didn't waste a minute. She got up and traveled to a town 100 miles away.
I'm wondering how long that would have taken her, too.
And that's a bit of a question. How long would have it taken? They said 20 miles a day, but man, that's trucking, but I guess they're used to it. You've got, and did she travel alone? How do you travel? My guess is you probably not, no. I'm sure they couldn't afford a donkey, and she walked. She hoofed it.
She probably had to go find some friend to come along with her and protect her from
I don't know. Because you don't see that Mary and her friends arrived with Elizabeth. There would have been pilgrim companies moving back and forth all the time. But we're going to talk when we get to the birth of Jesus about housing back then too. So you got to stay someplace at night. As a 14-year-old girl, do you sleep under the stars? Or do you stop at a neighboring town because you know you don't want to walk any further? You walk up, knock on the door, and say, "Hey, do you have a place for the night?" But she had absolutely no external sign she was pregnant. She hoofed at 100 miles. After texting Elizabeth, of course. She had no sign that Elizabeth was pregnant. Is there anything in her mind that made her think that she's going to knock on Elizabeth's door and Elizabeth is going to say, "What are you doing here?" Pregnant? Are you kidding me? No, I'm not pregnant. What are you even smoking? Mary had enough faith that a man that she knew to be an angel from her spirit told her she's going to be pregnant, and she immediately got up and traveled 100 miles. It is picture day and we can't be late. What were her thoughts as she walked? Did she hurry or walk slowly thinking? Almost certainly this was when she composed her Magnificat, loosely based in the Song of Hannah. She had this thing running through her head. And from that you get the feeling that she had this just sense of glory going through her. This high that she had from having heard the news and talked to the angel. What were her thoughts when she raised her hand to knock on the door? She was 1 week pregnant at that point.